In order to understand Bengaluru's water crisis today, it's important to understand a little bit about Bengaluru. Let's take a short trip back in time. It was the period of 1530s. 𝗣𝗥𝗧, a chieftain under the 𝗣𝗔𝗥𝗧 Empire, was one of the most educated and successful leaders of his time. Blessed with astute intelligence, 𝗣𝗥𝗧 saw great potential in this region. He envisioned that the region, already a trade hub, could be transformed into a thriving socio-economic region. The story begins here. 𝗣𝗥𝗧 one day was speaking to his mother about his grand plan and ambition, and she, with her remarkable foresight, gave him two pieces of advice. Advice number one, 𝗣𝗥𝗧, which means build lakes. Advice number two, 𝗣𝗥𝗧, which means plant trees. He then came up with a plan. You see, Bengaluru has an altitude of 920 meters above sea level. To give some perspective, Dehradun, the much loved hill station, sits at an altitude of 640 meters above sea level. Since Bengaluru was essentially a hill, water retention was a challenge even then, because when it rained, all the water ran down the hill. 𝗣𝗥𝗧 decided that the best thing to do was to construct artificial tanks, or lakes as we know them, at strategic locations all around the hill in such a way that when one lake was full, the overflow was carried into another lake through channels known as 𝗣𝗔𝗥𝗧. This water would help in irrigation, fishing, drinking, and most importantly, these lakes would influence the city's microclimate. Since then, lakes saw expansions and adaptations by the Mysuru kings and the British colonizers. Thus, Bengaluru came to be known as the city of 1,000 lakes, which was a testament to the foresight and planning of its founders. However, as we've seen with any civilization, the more the water availability and climate suitability, the more people migrate to that region. Bengaluru was no different. With rise in agriculture, trade and domestic settlement, there was a subsequent rise in lake encroachment as well. Over time, we turned these lakes into residential settlements, bus stations, stadiums, golf courses and even markets, leaving little to no trace of the trees and water bodies that once flourished. By the 1960s, the city was left with only 280 lakes. Over the past 2 decades, severely accelerated migration and drastic expansion in population have led to such high levels of water pollution that, let alone drinking, the lake waters cannot even be used for agriculture. Buildings have now begun to block the 𝗣𝗥𝗧ways, leading to the infamous monsoon flooding. In order to satisfy the water demand, the city began to indiscriminately dig into the earth for water, ultimately tapping into a not so easily replenishable source. To add on, the over-concretization of the surface area ensured that water did not have the means or the space to percolate down and recharge the groundwater sources. Today, borewells and lakes account for 51% of the city's water needs, with the remaining 49% coming from the river Kaveri, which approximately travels 90 kilometers and climbs an elevation of 350 meters to reach our taps at home. According to a study by the Indian Institute of Science, over-concretization is one of the primary reasons for today's drought-like situation, which brings us back to the 1530s. 𝗣𝗥𝗧, 𝗣𝗥𝗧. If only we had listened.